Welcome, everyone. Welcome. Today, we're going to be talking about the future of work. And with me to help us through this conversation or be a part of this conversation today is Kendall Harrell. He's a Minneapolis-based C-suite HR leader. He's had a couple decades worth of experience leading various parts of HR. So I'm really thrilled to have you here today, Kendall. And I appreciate you being a part of the podcast.
Oh, I'm honored to do it. Thanks for asking me. This is great.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to tell your story for you, so I'd love to just start with tell us a little bit more about Kendall. How did you get into the line of work you're in? How did I sweet talk you into being on the other side of this interview today?
Well, we HR people, we'd look for every opportunity to talk. So that was, you didn't have to twist my arm very hard. I didn't grow up in HR. I actually thought I was going to be an athletic trainer, working with a professional athletic team or college athletics.
Nice.
Potentially even be an orthopedic surgeon. I just fascinated by the human body and its capability. But once I got in the job market, I found out pretty quickly that those opportunities aren't a dime a dozen, and I had a difficult time getting into that network. So I found my way to Lifetime Fitness. It was for my first job, really, as a personal trainer. And I found myself, once I kind of really understood, how to be successful in that role, I just kind of, accelerated pretty quickly in that organization and went up through the business ranks, and I was working in the fitness division. And, I was lucky enough to have a really great mentor at Lifetime at the time. It was Andrew Robinson, still in HR. And he gave me an opportunity to work in recruiting. And, I didn't know what I was doing, but he said, "You're smart, you'll figure it out." and which has kind of been the story of my life. And, it was great. That kind of moved me into other opportunities within HR, organizational development and org effectiveness. I continued with some responsibility with recruiting and corporate recruiting, getting into employee relations and project management, HR technology, really started to kind of grab a hold of these building blocks of HR, total rewards, compensation mostly.
Nice.
And then, throughout, I kind of realized that I wanted to take this as far as I possibly could. And, I think I was probably in my early 30s when I decided, I was younger than that. I don't know if I was 30 yet. And I said I wanted to be a CHRO before I'm 50, not knowing what that meant, not knowing, you might as well said, I want to be an astronaut. It was it felt like that far away from where I was at the time.
Sure.
And, over the course of my career has really just been about trying to get in, put myself in positions where I'd have the opportunity to grow, to learn, make mistakes. And, I've had a really amazing career, I think, because of that. And, I find the HR executive role, if you will, I find it to be far more rewarding than I ever thought I would, far more challenging than I thought it would. I'm excited to continue. It's just, especially in this day and age, I think our topic will kind of speak to that. Because I think what's happening now is it's either really difficult to get people interested in building a career in HR, or they're completely fascinated by the opportunity that all of this kind of renaissance, if you will, is kind of created around us.
Yeah. So before we get into our topic, great story. Because I was wondering how did fitness lead into HR? So Lifetime Fitness, that makes some sense to me. What have you found to be the most, especially in the executive roles you've been in? So you said you found it to be more rewarding
Mm,
than you thought. So what, what did you find to be the most, or what have you found to be the
yeah,
most rewarding?
I think it just taps into one of my core values. My I think one thing that I learned from my father was his kind of mantra was bring others along, and I've kind of adopted that as well.
Mm-hmm.
And what I found is like the opportunity that I have to impact the careers of others, and give them opportunities for growth, like do some of the um, make some of the things that experiences that I went through that were some that were really difficult,
Mm-hmm.
um, make them less difficult for others, at least, make them less of a mystery to others.
Yeah.
Um, the opportunity to influence the growth of an organization uh, is just I just love it, and I also appreciate and the responsibility that comes with if things go sideways. Like
Mm-hmm.
you've got to be willing to step up and take the lumps for it. But when things go really really well, you also have to be equally as willing and eager to push that recognition to those people that are on your team, those folks that are executing the plan. Um, so I think counter to what I think a lot of people may think looking at these roles that um, the it's not for everyone
Mm-hmm.
because you have to be willing to accept the responsibility for um, when a plan doesn't go as planned
Mm-hmm.
as you intend it to,
Yeah.
but be again equally as eager to push the recognition to others because they deserve it. They really do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. So two things on that, right? One is I think it's easy for us to, I think everybody, to forget to celebrate
yeah.
wins because we're like, right, let's just get on to the next thing.
Hmm.
So I think that's a good reminder. And I think the other good reminder in what you're saying is, hey, HR are leaders within their own job family as well, right? Like we're not just in service to the organization, which we certainly are, but I think it's a good reminder too in, hey, like I'm leading in this area and there are people under me and how do I make their lives and journeys easier? I think it's a
Yeah.
good reminder that you're human too.
I don't know why that's a that's a touchy
Yeah.
subject, but yeah,
Yeah.
we are human.
Well, so let's dive into the future of work. It's an
Yeah.
area that I think you've been doing a lot of thinking about and passionate about. So lead the way.
Oh gosh, Ken, to be honest with you, I feel like I have more questions than answers right now, and I don't think I'm alone in that.
Yeah.
Uh, I think what I'm most excited about though is that it feels like just about everything's on the table. You know,
Hmm.
um, that some of the mainstays that are become kind of an orthodox of our work culture in the U.S. in particular um, are being challenged,
Hmm.
and for that reason, some of those provided security and kind of safety and comfort in how we run our businesses and lead teams.
Hmm.
But I think it's time for a little discomfort. I think it's time for us to kind of rethink and um, it's the same thing that you would do running a company when you have a long term strategy. At some point on regular intervals, you need to come back and revisit that strategy. You have to revisit um, your plan of action and say is the same business, environmental, kind of economic um, you know, environment still the same, or have they, as you would predict they would, have they changed? And I think that is kind of, we've been kind of casual, maybe a little lazy in regards to revisiting, the state of work in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think sometimes it takes, a lot of social or maybe civil unrest to um, be a catalyst
Mm-hmm.
for that new thinking. And I think that's maybe where we are right now, right? I think we're seeing through a lot of cultural pressure and influence, we're seeing things come out of it like pay transparency in ways that
Mm-hmm.
we've never had or seen before. I think that's a good thing. We're seeing additional um, laws, whether it be at the state level or municipality level, around safe and sick time and making
Mm-hmm.
sure that people have the ability to take care of the unpredicted things that happen in your life without fear of losing your job.
Yeah.
So it's I think we're just at a really interesting time. Um, you know, Still seeing sentiment around unions uh,
Mm-hmm.
at a kind of an all time high. Uh, and I think for us, we can either react to each of these little kind of clickbait, news flashes.
Mm-hmm.
They're material and they're meaningful, but we can react to each of those, or we could take a step back and think, okay, why? You know,
Yeah.
um, what's the root cause of some of these things? And I would come back to what I think I mentioned earlier, which is I think we're operating in a different time.
Yeah.
The context around our business is different. It's changing.
Yeah. Well, I think if we wheel it back really far, right, to my parents, maybe even your parents' generation, um, I remember just growing up in grade school, right, and as you're approaching graduating, thinking about what comes after graduation. Maybe that's college, maybe that's not. Um, I remember the thinking really being, all right, maybe you go to college, but then you find a job
Mm-hmm.
at a company and you stay there forever, grinding it out,
Yeah,
and the company will take care of you,
yeah,
right? Um, so both my parents, worked for over 30 years for their respective employers before retiring.
yeah,
And I remember just the kind of the shock from my parents each time I changed jobs, for example, on like, why are you leaving? Or what, so I think that's one example that I've seen throughout my entire lifetime, right? Is this change in, and I think I would even, as we think about pensions and um, 401ks and the move from pensions to 401ks, for example, and the ever looming whether or not Social Security will ever be here for us, that has been at least talked at me for 20, 30 years. I would say that was one big major sort of employment contract that I've seen
mm,
shift fully, right, in
yeah,
my lifetime, from um, work one place forever, they will take care of you, right, and that agreement, kind of shifting away, interestingly enough. But
yeah,
then I feel like the last 5-10 years has started to tick away at other elements, like you're talking about,
yeah,
like pay transparency, sick and safe time, um, virtual work, right?
yeah, right.
I was designing a virtual based assessment using Adobe Connect in 2011, and we were ahead of our time, right?
Yeah,
Now, like, this is all just ubiquitous, Zoom and Teams and things like that.
yeah.
So I want to,
I got my master's in adult education, in instructional design and online learning.
yeah.
And the reason I did it because I was in training and development at the time, and I was traveling all over the country, to do these, instructor led live face to face, workshops and training sessions.
Hmm.
And I just knew that there was a cap to that, but I wanted to learn, how might we do that? And so I chose Capella as a way to get my master's, because I wanted to not only learn this discipline of instructional design through CBT as much as anything else, but I also wanted to experience it, so I know what the learner was going through. And again, that was 2003 when I went through that, and I felt like, oh, this is cutting
edge. Yeah.
You are.
Yeah.
But,
and now it's just the given.
Yeah,
right?
Completely.
Well, so what I want to pull back to is, I feel like, as we look at some of these other elements of work, right? Virtual, hybrid, in person, pay transparency, unions, right? I feel like there's been, especially in the last 5-10 years, there's been so much push and pull.
Yeah.
Right. A lot of push for higher minimum wage, for example, or I feel like a number of years ago, there was a lot of pullback from unions, right? And maybe we're still facing some of that. So I'm just kind of curious, like, what are the things that you're seeing over the last, because I think there's a part of me that would say, gosh, it's 2025. It's April of 2025. It's been a wild year in terms of policy and things like that coming out of Washington. And you're bringing up like the state of work and how there's a real, I'm hearing you say there's opportunity, right? Yes. So I'd love for you to shed light on that, because I think a lot of people are concerned right now.
Well, the reason I think it's a great opportunity for us is that as leaders, it gives us a reason to do the right thing by our people. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't mean everybody makes $500,000 a year, and
right.
And I don't think that people are asking for that, literally either. I think where we are is reminding leaders that we have to listen to our people, and we need to be mindful of the contract that we've established with them, which is, we've established some clarity around what we need, like what we need to get from you by nature of your job, and in return we're going to give you this. All right, so you have this very balanced equation that employer and employee has at time of hire. Mm-hmm. Well, what happens when the employee asks for something to do their job per the terms that we've agreed upon, and they're not listened to, or they're not appreciated for recognizing that, I think there are tools that can do this better. Well, now what I'm getting for that, it's imbalanced, because now I can't do what you're asking me to do, and I'm getting paid this to not do the job that I want to do, and I want to do it well. And conversely, right, that for leaders, if we find ourselves in a situation where with what we're giving is no longer in alignment with what we're getting, right, then we have an issue, and we've established all of these things, whether it be performance management or PIPs or terminations or whatever. We have these tools at our disposal to address those things, including obviously performance management and employee development, skill building, and so forth. But we haven't really done a great job to give the employee the same amount of tools. Right. So they feel kind of stuck. Right. So you can play this out. When that happens, in many cases, now they don't trust their leader. Right. And so who will they talk to? Another employee that may be experiencing a similar experience. And so how do social movements start? It starts by people feeling disenfranchised. And it could be one or several. And then they find others that have a similar experience. So now you don't have just the one voice, you have many. And so that's their only tool today, is create a collective voice and that creates more tension and this kind of adversarial relationship between employer and employee. And if we're honest about it, then we should take a step back and say, okay, how do I make sure that our employees have tools, not only to do their job, but when things aren't going well, or they have questions about something, they have needs, how do we make sure that they have the tools to address the challenges that they're experiencing right now? Right. And which may just mean, opening up your ears and listening to your people.
Yeah.
Right. So I know I'm making a very complex situation pretty simple, but I think
Sure.
I think we try to overcomplicate things all too often. And I think this in the state of the U.S. right now, I think shame on us if we create an environment where the only recourse that employees have is to find other employees that are feeling the same discomfort, because there's no other way to resolve their problems.
I think I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I kind of feel like kind of what I'm hearing from you is there's certainly a lot of interesting whiplash, I'm going to say, coming out of Washington from certain policies, and coaching a leader today who's, his team's all over the place because of tariffs on, tariffs off, tariffs high, tariff low. But what I'm hearing you say is, regardless of what's happening there, the employee kind of contract, the way work is done, that's still being managed today as it was 6 months ago, right? And we still have the same challenges and opportunities today as we had.
Yeah, I think we are getting better. I am certainly on the optimist side of most issues, but I do think that there were lessons that we learned going through the pandemic that a lot of us forgot, and I think at the root of that is we were forced in a situation to bring real clarity in what's important, to priorities. And I think that unlocked a lot of employees on what they were focused on. Right. And so with that clarity, I can execute really well. And, we're not, there aren't any other distractions like, am I showing up at, 8 or 8:05? Or am I, leaving the office before or after my boss?
Yeah.
Or, am I spending too much time at the proverbial water cooler? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But those distractions were gone. Now, I will also say, though, that I don't think that everyone did their best work remotely. Sure. I know a lot of folks did. I know I don't. And so my point, and I know I'm being, I may ramble a little bit, but I think that the moral of this is that above all else, we as leaders need to bring clarity to the priorities for every single person that we employ, and amongst ourselves, right? As leaders, and I think that will drive. And by the way, that clarity is agnostic of where you turn your computer on, or all of that. But that's a whole nother topic.
Yeah, there is a big focus on that right now, though, right? Like, it's interesting to see the results that certain organizations had when everybody was remote, and then having been through the, preceding years of us, quote unquote, coming out of the pandemic, right? And I remember being, I don't know how I felt. Like I know I was sitting in certain town halls and just remembering how much executives were commenting on like how nice it is for us all to be together again. And I knew that there were conversations that were being had at the executive level about how badly certain executives at least wanted everyone back, right? And so there was, I think, over the last 5 years, or let's just call it the last 3 years, there's been a lot of tension, I think, between employees saying, hoping that companies don't, pull the lever and say, hey, everybody's coming back. And I think we've seen different decisions, mixture of, from everybody's coming back full time to, different kinds of hybrid restrictions or, tighter rules coming in. And I think it's just been an interesting time, right? Because on the one hand, I can look at this and say, hey, I get that you have this giant facility that you are, and I'm thinking of bigger companies like I worked for, right? Like you've got this giant facility, you are paying to heat and cool that building year round and to keep that water or the grass, outside looking great. So I can get the pull of, hey, if we have this giant asset and expense, and if we don't have people here, what are we doing? Or even if we think to like downtown areas, I'm certain there were certain lease agreements being made around occupancy, right? And so how are we now getting people back? But I feel like people are taking an all or nothing kind of approach, which I'm just curious what your reflection on that is. It feels like instead of us doubling down on leadership and saying, if you're not getting the output from an employee or a team that you expect, then that's management. Like you need to dig in and have the tough conversation around what's expected, right? And whether or not you're capable of delivering upon what's expected under whatever the current relation, whatever the current agreement is about where you're based on which days, right? But I feel like so many orgs are just making this like, let's just make it easy and then make a blanket decision.
Yeah, there are certainly those out there, and I think all too often we try to make this topic a binary one, right? Which is either you work from home or the office. And I know there are many organizations that have gone to a hybrid model, and I think what I would what I would offer is that this is a much like you said, that this is a leadership issue or topic. Mm-hmm. But we can't act like we have different individuals doing different work in ways that they do it best differently. You follow?
Yeah.
So depending on who I am, how I'm wired to be most productive, that's one kind of criteria. The other is the work that I do, right? That's another criteria. And then there is, depending on the type of work that I'm doing at that time, that's another criteria. So I think, if we can do whatever we can to give employees real agency over their work, which comes back to clarity on the work itself and the priorities, a real recognition for what type of work do you do best in what environment? Because if we're honest with ourselves, we may recognize that there are some things that I do that when I'm either at home or not in an office, I'll just say remote, I'm more efficient at them, or I can actually do the work output itself is going to be better. Or there are times when I need to be in an environment of inspiration or utility. There may be a particular utility that comes with the physical office space that allows you to do the work more efficiently or better or more collaboratively, or that may be. So, so I don't think there's a right answer that says one is better than the other. I think the answer is we have to come back to being clear
Yeah.
about the objectives of the work. And, what we should really care about is how do we make sure that we deliver the best work and that our employees have agency in doing so.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know.
Well,
It may seem like real pie in the sky kind of thing,
yeah.
but I don't believe that that's an unrealistic expectation for us as leaders.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and not to make this the remote work versus in-person work debate episode, but I have one other question for you, and then we'll get off this topic in just a second. But I think you were at Caribou Coffee at kind of in the midst of coming out of the pandemic, and I'd be just really curious to hear because not only is Caribou running retail coffee shops, but you also had manufacturing operation essentially.
Correct.
As well, right? So when you were there, you were balancing essential workers from non-essential. I'll just make it real binary for us. But so how were you balancing coming out? Because I think there's been some interesting conversation happening out there around the fairness of the fact that we've got frontline workers who have no choice, but I can't brew coffee for Caribou customers from my kitchen, right? So a barista needs to be there. So before I say more, I'm curious. I'm sure there was plenty of conversation around. I'll say equity, or equality versus equity around location.
Well, first, what I'll say is I mean every opportunity I can to applaud the Caribou organization, in which, when I say that, I mean the frontline baristas, the general managers, to the multi-unit leaders and secondary directors and so forth. I would say that I was so impressed with how they showed up and the work they did, because I think what they heard from us was serve your community and serve your community in as safe way as possible. And tell us what you need to do that well, and, you remember this time, it was very difficult to meet everyone's needs, but, we were activated so quickly on touchless payments and, moving to drive-through only and, adjusting
things that were in the works, right? Like these things were kind of in the works, and they're in. Yeah.
It was so impressive. But the one thing they also heard was, we don't care what your plan is. Forget budget. Serve your community. And our purpose statement is, I still say our. I left there about a year ago. But our purpose was to create day-making experiences that spark a chain reaction of good. And we went back and re-emphasized that. And they were just doing some really incredible things in their communities. Bringing canteens of coffee to first responders and taking care of, healthcare workers as they would come through the drive-through line. And you just knew that they needed that coffee as bad as anyone on the planet.
Yeah.
So I was just really impressed with them during that time. And there was a level of, I think, real understanding on what the assignment was. Our roastery team, they were just phenomenal at, safety measures and incorporating new safety measures to make sure that everyone was safe. And, those folks that weren't coming into the office anymore, just staying plugged into the business and supporting, some of these community events in droves. It was just really cool to see. And so I think that's a lesson for all of us around that whole clarity topic. Let's just be clear on what our priorities are. And, people they shouldn't surprise you. People will do what people do. um, and that is just take pride in the work that they do.
Yeah. Cool. Well, so let's come back to the broader topic, which is, the future of work. And I think what we're really talking about is the future of like the employment agreement, right?
Yeah.
And what should employees expect out of their organizations? What should organizations expect out of employees? And the thing that I keep thinking about as you're talking here is, um, so things in Washington change, right? Every 2 to 4 years,
Right.
depending on,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
kind of change there is. But one thing that doesn't change is what we know about, I'll just pick on employee engagement, right? And where and how employee engagement drives so many other results for an organization, right? How, employee engagement impacts sick time, right? Impacts performance. I could go on and on. Um, there was something I was just reading yesterday, even about how one of our lessons learned. So here I go going back to COVID again, but one of our lessons learned coming out of COVID, and that I think there is getting additional, some additional conversation is starting around community and the lack of community that is happening for people in their communities, right? And then where does an employer step into that space? And I was just kind of thinking about that as you were talking, and I was thinking about employee engagement and how that affects things, and how time, helping people make connections at work.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know if this is bringing anything up for you, but I just was kind of,
when I hear you talk about it, like, there's one kind of anecdote. Actually, there's one individual that I think is doing incredible community work, and his name is Houston White, and he is, he's a serial entrepreneur. He's a barber
right here in our backyard.
Yeah, in the Camden neighborhood,
Mm-hmm.
and I had a chance to meet him a couple of years ago, and he was talking about his vision for Camden, North Minneapolis neighborhood, and he was talking about making Camden a place of community again, a place where people are welcomed and can congregate and have meetups. And he has a coffee shop there called the Get Down Coffee Company.
Yep.
And it's a phenomenal. I mean, I happen to be a big hip hop fan, and it's very hip hop themed. So you'll find me there every once in a while. But in the spring and summer, on Saturdays, he has a local chef come out, and they do breakfast burritos, and right there on the street. And you're waiting 2 hours for these bad boys, and they're worth it,
All right.
And so I come back to the community piece. What you're starting to see now is exactly what his vision was that, an area that has had a bad stigma a little bit is now a place where you go grab a cup of coffee, chill out, grab something to eat. He'll do book drives out there, all of which he is kind of built and coordinated through this, kind of vision of his. And I don't know the role of every organization to find ways to facilitate that kind of environment, to make our communities a gathering place again, to make them safe, to make them a place of fun and celebration of culture. I don't have an answer to that, but I know that one gentleman has taken it upon himself to change his, kind of slice of the city. And I think it's a lesson for all of us to figure out ways to either support people that are doing that work, partner with them, create and generate, opportunities and, for them, or do it ourselves.
Right.
Rather than donating, don't just
Yeah.
It's beyond writing a check. It's how do you show up?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it kind of gives me this sense of there's community. Community can be created in a lot of places, right?
Yeah.
It can be created literally in the community that you live in, as well as the kind of community we are trying to create, in our organizations
Mm-hmm.
as
Yeah.
well, right? And I think I've seen a bit more pull for that, and I think the engine is starting to hum a bit more.
Mm.
Um, well, I think we're going to have you back on to talk more about
I
the
love it.
future of work. I'm going to force us into the final part of the show, which is I asked you to come prepared to talk about a few things, and I'm making kind of continuing to evolve
Yeah.
how this goes for the show. So I specifically asked you for one piece of advice for leaders
Yeah.
and one piece of advice for, I'm just going to say, supporters of leaders. So
Yeah.
typically, I think the easy one for me is to say HR folks, right?
Yeah.
Talent management, leadership development, heads of HR. But I want to include leaders of leaders in that as well, right? Because it's not just HR who's supporting leaders out there.
Right.
So
Right.
let's start with advice for leaders.
I think my advice for leaders is to look for ways to create a stage for every single one of your employees, everyone on your team. There aren't very many people that enjoy promoting themselves. Despite it being, like it or not, it is a valuable skill when looking to build and grow a career. Promote the work that you do, and make your wins visible. But I also think that managers can play a pivotal role in that, in creating the space, the proverbial stage, right, for every individual to have a time when they can shine and have their work speak for itself without them having to feel like they have to self-promote.
Yeah.
I think as leaders, that is something I've tried to do consistently, regularly. Sometimes people don't necessarily want it. It feels uncomfortable.
Sure. Yeah.
But it's it's the best way to be undeniable as someone that performs, is to put it front and center.
Yeah.
So
I had a leader who I'm gonna tag onto that, who he always said it was his mission. It was his mission to be a net exporter of talent, right? That his goal was always to make his people look good.
Yep.
And nothing made him feel better than, even though he would have a gap to fill, nothing would make him feel better than them being able to move on to something.
Oh, absolutely.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So advice for those who support other leaders.
Yeah. I would just remember that leaders are employees too. Right. And essentially, I don't care what your title is. By and large, we all have aspirations that need support, and that we need kind of, I'll say, advocacy around. We all need to know that we have people in our corner. We all have insecurities, right? And that we can, that I think, if I'm speaking to my fellow HR people out there, make sure we're taking the time to get to know the leaders that we support and work with. Get to know what their aspirations are, what their superpowers are. That's kind of catchphrase right now. What did those leaders do as well or better than anyone? Because you can always use those strengths as ways to validate future performance, validate confidence in future performance, and then get them to be vulnerable with you. Develop a trusting relationship so that they can share the things that they're not comfortable, doing, because those are the opportunities that you will have to make those other people more successful.
Yeah. Awesome. Uh, I've had Kevin Wilde on and talking about coachability, local guy. Um, and I would say that's, a theme there too that's coming up is right. It gets lonelier and lonelier, right, the higher you go, right?
Yeah,
So I think it's a good call out for, remember that your leaders are employees too. And I'll tag on to that from earlier in the episode. And HR, you are leaders too, right? You are
absolutely.
also.
Right, right.
All right. Well, what else?
Um, Gosh, I had I had an interesting call. So I have this book called the Rules of the Red Rubber Ball. I wish I had one to
Mhm.
show it to you. It's a tiny little miniature book. It's a very quick read, kind of remedial, for lack of a better term.
Sure.
But it is brilliant in its simplicity, and it's written by a gentleman named Kevin Carroll.
Okay. Can you
Um,
say the name of the book one more time?
the Rules of the Red Rubber Ball.
Okay. Okay, cool. I'll make sure to link to it in the
And
show notes.
I've given it to just about every person that I've hired to be on my team since I was exposed to it or
Nice.
introduced to it in 2008 ish,
Nice.
2009. Um, what it plays on is just the um, creativity and innovation that comes from the freedom of play as a child that we lose as we get older, and to remember to kind of allow yourself um, to bring back those elements of play in your work,
Mm,
right?
nice.
And it's a really kind of well written kind of biography of his upbringing and the lessons that he learned from it.
Cool. I'll
Um,
have to check that out.
and then the other one I suggest is The Go Giver.
Okay.
And this was I wrote the author John David Mann is the author, and the basis of it are these kind of essential rules for um, stratospheric success. And the premise of it is about um, real success comes from being extremely liberal with your the things that bring value, your skills, yourself. That the more successful you will become is a product of how willing you are
Mm,
to take care of others' interests first.
mm,
There's a rule of authenticity, which says, the most valuable gift that you can offer someone is yourself. And I've, as I alluded to earlier, I've been doing a lot of networking while I'm kind of in search for my next role, and it has brought some real reciprocity to these
mm.
interactions.
Yeah.
Um, you know, that has made networking so enjoyable for me to be able to, know and recognize that I have some real valuable traits and skills that whoever I'm talking to, it doesn't really matter.
Hmm.
I want them to know that I'm willing to give of myself
Yeah.
in any way that they need. I don't care if it's proofreading a deck that they
Yeah.
aren't quite comfortable for the main stage in the organization yet, or talking through an area of conflict they may have, and they want a safe space to do that. Talking about some of those, regular and um, traditional HR initiatives that we drive, and new ways to think about them, or it doesn't really matter. Uh, and it's just, and I was inspired to do so
Hmm.
from this book, The Go Giver.
Nice.
Also, a short read. You can find it on Spotify as well.
Cool. Well, I appreciate you giving to all of us
Yeah.
by being here today. So that brings us to the end. So I will have to have you back on.
I would love to. Thanks a lot, Ken.
Yeah, thank you. And, big thanks to all the listeners. And just one last thank you, Kendall, for being here today. Greatly appreciate it.
Sure thing.